Moms who know do less so they can focus on what matters most, taking care of themselves, their families, and living their God-given purpose. Moms who know focus on the little things they can do that grow to have a big impact. You are connecting with your family, your true self, and your God-given purpose. You are a mom who knows. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm joined today by Jennifer Allwood. Jennifer, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, I'm actually super excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, hopefully, I know it's going to be worth the wait. We had some technical glitches this morning, and sometimes those end up being the best calls. It's like everything has to align sometimes, and then when it does, just magic happens. And I am expecting good things. I'm excited to talk to you today. As I learned more about you and what you do, one thing really stood out to me, and that is the idea of God-given purpose. Mm-hmm. That is a new focus of the Moms Who Know podcast, and I just love this idea, and I want to dive deep on that today. Before we get started, let me tell you guys a little bit more about Jennifer. She is a wife, mother, dynamic business coach, host of the Jennifer Allwood Show podcast, and she's been in business for over 18 years. She started with decorative and faux painting and then has turned that into a business. And now she helps other creative entrepreneurs turn their crafts into businesses, which I think is so awesome that you're on that end, helping women to also live their dreams. So to start off with, tell us just a little bit more about you, anything that I missed in that brief introduction, and
that was great.
Started. Okay.
Yeah. So so it was in the year 2000. Well, I actually have a degree in like computer-based information systems, which is just really not a good fit. And, I went back to college in my 20s and graduated with that degree when I was 30. And right before graduation, as a 30-year-old, I was working in an office environment. I learned about what decorative painting and faux painting was. I live in the Kansas City area, and it was so popular. And I was obsessed. I had bought my first home when I was 21, and I loved decorating and I loved painting. And I had like crackled my walls and things before that was even like on HGTV. And I was obsessed with HGTV when it was starting. And I loved everything about making a home pretty, but I just didn't have any idea how that could be a career that I could make any money at. But in the year 2000, I got laid off from my computer job where I was doing software development. And I had just been to like a painting school where I learned how to do some techniques in my own house. And I'd been kind of messing around, just playing with it on the side in a couple people's homes. And it was at that point that I was like, let me see if I could actually make this into a business. And I did. And it was a very lucrative business for many, many years. And then about 5 years ago, I got to where, I was just kind of done with it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Chanel. You just know when a door is closed.
Yeah.
And it had been really good until it wasn't anymore. And all of a sudden I was thinking, gosh, now I've got 8 women who are out painting for me every day. I'm really not painting. I hadn't painted in years because I stayed home while we had kids and just managed the business. And I didn't like the management of women. And I had realized that I had ran out of hours in a day that I could work from home. And that the only way that I could actually make more money is if we either like did double the amount of women. So went from 18 women painting to 16, which just sounded like torture. Or I was going to have to figure out like some other way to do my business. And I had an aha moment one day that, okay, I live in Kansas City. I can only paint the homes for people who are here in Kansas City unless people are willing, to take me somewhere, fly me somewhere. But what if I taught people who weren't in Kansas City how to paint in their own homes? And I came out with like a line of painting videos. And I wasn't sure if this would be like super lucrative. I was thinking to myself, gosh, people know they can just go to YouTube and they can Google the same thing and learn how to do it there. But it turned out to be just a genius idea that went to 6 figures within 14 months of teaching people how to paint online. And at the same time I was teaching people to paint, I was growing my Facebook, growing my Instagram and my Pinterest. And I started having all these people who were like, Jen, how are you doing that? How do you have 50,000 followers and then 100,000 followers and then 200,000 followers on Facebook? And I realized, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at social media. And people just kept asking me, is the truth? And eventually I was like, well, I had never really considered teaching people how I've grown my social media, but I guess I could. And so I put out a couple of like webinars, and then I started a membership group. And so right now I have over 3,000 women every month who they're not all crafters and makers. We have everything from real estate agents to dog walkers to organizers to designers who I teach how to use the social media space to build their business online. And those are all like paying clients, and business is phenomenal because what I have figured out is that my purpose is really in encouraging other women. And I'm doing that through encouraging them how to grow a business right now.
Oh, okay. So much good stuff in there. One thing that really stands out to me is you said they could just go to YouTube. Like, why would I do that? They could just go to YouTube. And I think that doubt just comes up so often. I hear that from so many women. They get an idea, right? Yeah. And like, oh, I could do a podcast or write something, write a blog, write a book, whatever, teach painting online, but someone's already doing that. But someone else could do it, but they could just go to YouTube. What do you tell them when this voice comes up?
Yeah. All of that is 100% absolutely true. But here's what I tell people. This is like in the decorative painting industry, for instance, what I tell my painters is this: you're in the middle of the industry. And so you're hyper aware of anybody else that's doing what it is that you want to do. It's kind of like if you go out and buy a red Corvette, then you notice all the other red Corvettes on the highway. Like before you maybe didn't really notice, but now all of a sudden you're hyper aware of that. And that's what happens in the online space. We think, well, there's so many people who are already making leather earrings, or there's so many people who are already, business coaches, or there's so many people who are already writing books. But the truth is nobody's doing the business coaching or the earrings or the writing books like you do. They don't have your voice and your take on it. And they're also not super aware of everybody else that's already doing it. Like your ideal client, my ideal client right now is looking for a business coach. She probably is not aware that there are, thousands of business coaches in the online space, but nobody else is coaching exactly like I do. And even though I know that there's, 999 other people doing the same thing, I have my own take on how I coach. I come from a particular angle. I do it different than what everybody else does, not better, but just different. And so that's what I'm always telling my entrepreneurs, like, Target wasn't going, oh crap, but Walmart's already doing that thing. No, there's room for everybody.
Yes. Okay. That's so powerful because we shut ourselves down a lot of times before we even begin, It's just so easy to do, to talk ourselves out of that. So,
and can I expand on that just
please?
Because, and I'm writing about this in a book right now that'll be released in the spring. And I have this whole chapter talking about that exact topic, Chanel, where I basically talk about how sometimes it's easier for us women to just say, well, everybody else is already doing it. The market is already saturated. I'm starting at zero and it's already popular. Like, how would I break through? And really what that is a way of self-protecting. It's easier to say everybody else is already doing it than taking the chance at beginning. Mm-hmm. And so I am constantly telling women that's an excuse. The everybody's already doing it. Totally an excuse. Absolutely. It's not like, Adidas didn't ever not come out with shoes because Nike already had shoes, because Puma already shoes. I mean, there's plenty of room for businesses, and there's zero better time to be in business than right now with the internet. And so I really encourage women to, if they really want to start something, to really examine if that's what they're telling themselves, that so many people are already doing it. Really examine if that's really what you believe, or are you just trying to protect yourself from the fear of starting? And when you really can be honest with yourself, then I think you can get down to the business of actually making the jump.
Yes. Okay. So good. Now, and as you told your story, one other thing that stood out to me is this idea that you didn't just jump into what you're doing now, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're writing a book. Now you're doing business coaching, but you have kind of a windy path to get there. And I think a lot of women are on this windy path and then get confused because of that and say, well, is this my purpose? Is that my purpose? How do I know which one really is my purpose? What are your thoughts on finding that? And specifically how you found your purpose?
Well, I think purpose it's a super sexy word right now. But it's also very confusing for people because a lot of times people want their job to be their purpose. And sometimes you just have to pay the mortgage. And sometimes the things that are your purpose are not going to be lucrative. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So I know that, I'm writing this book, and I was thinking one day, and I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian. And so that's a huge part of my life and how I coach people. And I was, when I was getting ready to write the book, I was thinking to myself, I had heard this influencer talking one day on social media about how she feels like something she just put out into the world was like her best life's work. And so I'm thinking about writing my book, Chanel, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I wonder if this is going to be like my best life's work. And I literally felt like I heard the Lord say, what if your kids are your best life work? Because for me, I feel like my purpose is first wife, then mom, then business owner. And so I really have, a hierarchy of things in my life. And so when it comes to business, though, when we're talking about our business purpose, I don't want people to get confused and think that they can always monetize their purpose, because sometimes they can't. And sometimes your purpose is different than the way that you're actually going to pay the car payment. And I also think that a lot of times the things that you start out doing are not the things that you're going to be ending up doing, but God will use those things as like what I call a gateway drug. So I know that when it came to like my platform, people were really attracted to the painting and the decorating and the DIYing. And that was my gateway drug. That is not that I was intentionally using that, but that's what brought people onto my platform and was attractive, and pretty rooms and beautiful paint colors and all of the things. And then as I have shifted more into what I think my purpose is, which is encouraging and motivating and training women, I can see and I can look back on that windy road that you're talking about now and be like, okay, all of those things now make sense, which isn't to say that there haven't been things along the road that have failed miserably and that have not made sense. And that I've been like, okay, so this road took a little detour. That definitely wasn't the right one. We're just going to put the car in reverse, back on up, get back on track. But I'm so grateful that I can look back now and, see this amazing business that I've built that's, now we have 7 employees, and my husband's been able to come home from corporate America and work full time with me. And, we're able to travel, and we just took in a 4-year-old little girl, and we're able to do all these things we could never do before because I just kept saying yes to the next right thing on the road. And that, I think, so often is what will lead someone to purpose.
Yes. Oh, okay. As you were talking, this story came to mind. I'm just going to tell this really quick. This is from Jeffrey R. Holland, and he tells a story that he and his son were out on a hike, and they were driving back on this dirt road, and they came to a fork in the road, and they didn't know which way to go, and so they prayed about it, and they both felt that they should go right or left. I can't remember, but they both felt like they should go this one direction. So they did. They drove not very far down the road, and it was a dead end. And so they turned around and went back the other way. And later his son, I don't remember if I said his son was with him. All right. His son says to the dad, we prayed about it. We felt like we were supposed to go that way, and it was a dead end. Why would God tell us to go that way? And what Jeffrey Holland said is that sometimes God has us go down these roads that are a dead end, so we know which is the right road, so that when we're on that right road, we can feel really clear. I love that story. And that just aligns so much with what you were saying about we're going to take these kind of false steps. We're going to go down, but it doesn't mean it's not leading us. We put the car in reverse, we go the other way, and then we're very clear. Okay, this feels right where that other one did not feel right.
Right. And I think, when it comes to purpose or starting a new career or anything, people would really like to know 100% for sure that this is going to be successful, because that windy road is very awkward and uncomfortable at times, and people fall off on the windy road. And so often I think we're looking for that reassurance that every step we're going to take is like the right thing. And so often it's just not. That's not the way that it's going to work out. And it's so good that we often don't know in advance, like what our actual purpose is. Like, I think sometimes people are like, I don't know my purpose, and it feels frustrating for them. But what I encourage people to do is to keep saying yes to the things that feel right, that are put in front of them, because that'll often lead you to the purpose. And it oftentimes is in a place you never dreamed you were going to end up. If you had told me when I started my decorative painting business in the year 2000, that we would be doing multiple 7 figures a year, I'm writing a book, coaching 3,000 women a month, I would have literally hid in the corner and sucked my thumb with nervous diarrhea. I couldn't have handled it. I would have just, as an introvert, and there's no way I could have handled that, and I would have ran in the other direction. So I think often when we're on this path to purpose, it's in God's goodness that we don't always know what's coming down the road. And I think that that's so often a good thing. That way we don't, run and sprint in the other direction.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing that you talked about is, our purpose doesn't always make us money. I love this idea of our family as our first purpose. And that is something that I try to live every day. I have these things that I feel called to do. And yet my biggest calling is family and these relationships that I'm building here in my home. Now, some people, even beyond their home, might have a dream or a purpose that does not necessarily bring money. Talk to us a little bit about that. And you have a phrase that I love about a servant's heart. Tell us what that means too.
Well, I'm sitting here trying to remember what I've said about a servant's heart because I've said a lot of things. But, well, I do think, I think that the Bible does talk about and that God does give us wisdom to gain wealth. So sometimes that can mean purpose. Other times that means that he gives you a skill that is valuable in the marketplace that will fund your purpose, which may not be something that's bringing in money. I mean, you can't tell me that people who are serving over in the Bahamas right now because of the devastation of, the hurricane, that they're not serving a purpose or even their life's purpose, but they may not be making any money off of that. And so I do think that God will give us other ways to bring in an income that will fund the purpose that we have. I was talking about how we took in a 4-year-old little girl. She actually just turned 5 a couple weeks ago, and I'm still getting used to saying she's 5. And we've had her for almost a year, but it has not been without an expense, both monetarily and emotionally. But, there's a lot of bills that go into lawyers and appointments and medications and healing and all of those things. And I do think that my family is my purpose, raising this little girl my purpose, but it's costing something. It's not like it's bringing in revenue. So thank you, Jesus, that I've got a job that pays really well, that allows me to fund some other things that I do believe are part of my purpose. And so, I know that when people are searching for purpose, I feel like everybody's wanting to find what their purpose is with their job. And sometimes God will give you a job that funds your purpose, but it's not often going to be that your purpose makes you an income. And that's hard for some people to swallow.
Yeah, it is. I think that's a lot of times what we hear. And then if people are spending time in a job and feeling like that's not their purpose, there can often be this disconnect. Like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this job, but it's not my purpose. There must be something else out there. And then they feel like they're missing the mark. Where what I hear you saying is, you can still do that job, and then you can also incorporate your purpose, whatever that
100%.
is.
Yeah. Absolutely 100%. And sometimes somebody's purpose, because I do think that, I also think that there's time, we're looking for like our big overall arching purpose of being here on earth. And I do think that, I had a purpose 20 years ago in starting the painting business, where I had several women who came to paint for me who were in terrible marriages and needed a life skill that would allow them the income to make good choices for them and their children. There was purpose in that. There was absolute purpose in that. So that purpose is now something different. What I'm doing now definitely has a purpose in it too. And so I just don't want people to get so stuck on purpose because you can be stuck in a job that you really dislike, but there could still be purpose that you're there. Maybe you're there just to minister to the girl that sits in the cubicle right next to you. You know what I mean? Like there can still be really good things that count in some of those places where we feel like we're in a dead end. And I also think sometimes we're in a dead end as a way, because sometimes the only way God can get us to like pivot into something that he has for purpose with us is that we're so uncomfortable in the place we're currently in. And so, you know what I mean? So like on one hand, I think we need to recognize that wherever you are today, be purposeful, be intentional and do a decent job while you're there. Recognize the opportunities that are put in front of you while you're there. But also know that if you get uncomfortable enough, you will make some hard decisions that will pivot you into doing the thing that perhaps you were meant to do all along.
Oh, yes. I love that so much. I think that's so true and so important. Like we can recognize the purpose in everything that we do. Totally. Okay. So for listeners, as people are listening to this and thinking, for a long time for me, I remember I would hear things about this idea of, finding what you're supposed to be doing and this idea of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I really struggled with it for a long time because I was a stay-at-home mom and that was my life. And I loved these little people, but I wondered, is there something else for me? Is there something else I'm supposed to do? How do you help women to discover what it is they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah. Well, there's seasons for everything. And so for a season, you stayed home and raised little people. And so did I. That's why I stayed home and had all these women out painting for me. And I was raising our kids until they all got into school. And that was the season that I was in. And I think it's super important to recognize seasons. But I think it's super important, as a person of faith, I'm always hyper aware of the fact too, that if God's asking me to do something, even if I still have now 4 children, here at home, it's really important for me to prioritize that and not make my children and raising this family into an idol. So, I think that it's a dangerous thing sometimes that women get into of sacrificing everything at the altar of their children, because that's not actually what I believe we're called to. And it also sets our children up for failure, because when they get out into life as, grownups one day, the world does not revolve around them. So it's like this fine balance between you want to be really serving your family, and that is supposed to be, above our business 100% of the time. However, you want your kids to see that mom has a life outside of just mothering. And mom has things that God's asking her to do outside of just wiping bottoms and, putting kids to bed at night, even though that is like one of my favorite callings on my life. But I think it's super important that our children witness the fact that mom is still a human and an individual outside of being a mother, because those kids are not going to be home forever. We've got one that's a senior this year, Chanel. And so, I'm hypersensitive to the fact that we won't have children living in our home forever. And I can both parent and feel like I'm serving my purpose and what God's asked me to do while I'm here on earth at the same time. And I think that it's super healthy for my children to witness that and to see that, okay, mom's doing some big, hard, and scary things that count, that matter, and that are changing people's lives, and that, are doing good things in the world. And she was at my football game tonight. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it's this, and there's so much talk too about like balance. And I think that balance is a crazy notion. What the heck is balance? I mean, is balance? Does it ever really happen? There are seasons, I think, that we need to be all in more with our family, like the seasons that you and I were in with raising little people. And then there are seasons when, we need to push in other areas that maybe God is bringing to the forefront. And so, does that help? Is that an answer to your question?
Yes, that's a beautiful answer. And I think I agree with you about balance. It's never that everything is perfectly balanced. It's that you're kind of leaning towards one side, and then before you fall over, you run and pick up, the other side and kind of figure it out. Well, it's a constant balancing act, but it's never just still and everything all in alignment and everything all balanced. So as moms are trying to figure this out, how have you let go of guilt?
Yeah. Well, guilt is a funny thing. I don't think we're always supposed to let go of guilt. And if I steal something, I'm going to feel guilty, Chanel, and I should. And so if I'm not giving the right things in my life attention, I probably will feel guilty. And so I don't want to let go of that. Does that make sense? Like if I am neglecting my family for my business, and in my core, in my heart, I know it. I know that I am not showing up for my family like I should. I'm on my phone all night. I'm traveling all the time. I'm not giving them the attention that they need. I'm answering emails instead of reading books at bed. Like I should feel. There's a part of me, I always want to feel guilt if I'm out of alignment. And so I think right now in our culture, we're being told there should be no such thing as guilt. There should be at times if we're out of alignment. And so I use that guilt to I have to recognize it, look at it and be like, okay, am I putting this on myself? Am I imagining something that I shouldn't? Am I just, feeling bad about things that I shouldn't? And if that's the case, then that's the kind of guilt we need to get rid of, because that doesn't serve us. But if it's in fact that, well, Jen, you've been on your phone for the last 3 hours. You've paid zero attention to your husband. He could use some attention too. You guys haven't been on a date night in weeks. Like that's a good kind of guilt that'll help bring me back to center. So while the rest of the world is, I think, screaming right now, let go of guilt. I don't really subscribe to that thinking. I think guilt can be good when we're out of alignment.
Yeah, I have never heard it said exactly like that, but I think you're exactly right on. Guilt is there for a reason. And like you said, it's that guilt, that unnecessary guilt when we're
Yeah.
not actually doing anything wrong, we're
Right.
not actually out of alignment.
Yes.
We need to let go of
I
that.
mean, there's
And
one
that's
thing
important.
if your mother-in-law is trying to shame you, that's one thing, and you're feeling guilty because she said, you haven't decorated the house for the holidays. Like that's something totally different, and that you just need to let go by the wayside. But if I've got that gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach that I could be doing better in a certain way, and I feel bad that I have been failing, the things that I say are my biggest priority. Because here's what I have seen, what's happening, I think, with women today is we're talking about what our priorities are and what we hold of the most value. So for me, that's my relationship with the Lord, my husband and my kids, and then my business. But some of our decisions are out of alignment with that. And then we're wanting to scream, but I'm not going to feel guilty. Well, if you say that these things are, the hierarchy of the things that matter most to you, but your decisions are not in alignment with those things, then I don't know that guilt is a bad thing. That can really help to kind of get you back to center, I think.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, when you look at it and you're like, oh, because I think sometimes we can guilt ourselves for the silliest thing. Oh, I was spending too much time with my husband. Some people get guilty if they go out on date night, right? They feel guilty. Oh, I was spending too much time with my husband and leaving the kids alone.
Yeah,
well,
that's
no,
crazy.
actually, that is one of your priorities. That's a good thing. You're living in alignment. So that's, letting go of that
Kids
guilt.
have got to see you doing that sort of thing and Jason and I, my husband and I, we've made that into a priority. Our children need to see that our life does not revolve around them. We adore our children, but we're people too. And we need time away, and we need time to just focus on our marriage. And the best thing that we can do for our children is make sure that our marriage is as healthy as possible. And that can't happen if we never get any face time alone. And so, with 4 kids and busy schedules, it's hard, and we got to fight and claw for it. But I do think that it's so important to not feel guilty over those sorts of things. And your kids will make you want to feel guilty. We try to get away out of town, my husband and I, once a year or so without the children. And there's times, our kids will say things like, wow, going to Florida without us, huh? And the answer is yes, sweet. And when you're married someday, I hope you enjoy your spouse enough that you want to go out of town just with them. It's not that we don't love and adore our children. We do. We're just not centering our lives around them.
Yes, that's beautiful. Okay, we are about out of time. I have loved the things that you've taught us today. One of the things that as we shift into this new focus for moms who know is the idea of doing less so that we can focus on what matters most. So to close, I want to ask you, how can we do less and focus on what matters most, which is these things that you've outlined for us today? God, family, purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think, that might not be the order of priorities for some people. So I think the first thing is to knowing what are the things that are most important to you. And then I think it's really examining your time, and the things you're spending your time on line up with that. And I also think, I just wanted to share this with your audience because it was powerful. I recently took a 2-week long sabbatical off of social media, and, with 500,000 social media followers, that was kind of hard for me to do initially. It was hard for me to make the decision to know. That's the big thing. I had not been off social media even for a day in 10 years. And I was trying to write this book, and it just was kind of feeling like I was trudging uphill with, through mud with shoes that were too big for me. It was not coming together like I wanted it to. And I just kept feeling like social media was really being a distraction because I was, taking kind of my eyes off my lane, and I was looking at other people who were launching books, and I was feeling like this little seed of, oh my gosh, that, comparison and that imposter syndrome and a little bit of jealousy at times. And I'm like, you know what? I need to just get off social media so I can really just gather myself, recenter, remind myself what's important, hear from the Lord, and just really disconnect for a little bit. And so I took a 2-week long social media sabbatical, and it was freeing. It was absolutely one of the best things that I've done. Well, for sure, all year long, both for my business and I think for my family, because it made me realize how much time I spend on social media. And yes, this is my job and what I teach people to do, but there's so much time when I'm just mindlessly scrolling, and I could be instead paying attention to the things that I say matter matter. And so it really just helped me to remember what my priorities are and to get my time in alignment with my priorities. And so I would suggest that for anybody listening, especially if it makes you twitch as you even hear me talking about it, that's probably a good sign that you might just try taking just a little bit of a sabbatical from social media. And that will really help you focus then on the things that matter most.
I love that idea. I have done that too. And it is powerful to see.
Yes.
It's really eye-opening. It lets you see from an outside perspective, just how much time you're spending and just how often you think about it. Oh, I should go. Oh, wait, no, I'm not going on social media. It's like, oh, I would have been checking that a lot today and without even thinking about it. So that's a great thought. That's a great way we can honestly do less is by getting off of social media. So
I'm going to end with one more thing if you don't care. I put this in my book and because I think it's so powerful. A friend of mine said a few years ago, she put it on Facebook and I like screenshotted it and I like, oh my gosh, her name's Carolyn. And it's been so powerful to me. And she put on Facebook, what if every time we tried to open up Facebook or Instagram, we instead hugged one of our children? Like throughout the day. And I was like, holy smokes, that's convicting because, when we go to social media, we're literally like watching other people find their purpose, live out their purpose, follow their dreams, love on their people. And yet we've got like this purpose and these dreams and these kids and this family and a spouse like right there, at our fingertips. And yet when we're on social media, we're spending time watching other people do all the things that deep down we really want to be doing. And so I've always remembered that, thought that was so powerful. So I just wanted to throw that in here as we end.
I love it. That's a great place to end on. I think that's a good thought for us to ponder. So thank you so much. So many words of wisdom today and good things that you shared. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. Jennifer is amazing, and I loved having her on the show. She just had so many good things to share. I hope that you had a lot of takeaways from this episode. What I want you to think about right now is what one little thing are you going to do differently, or one little way you're going to think differently, or some insight that came to you as you were listening to this episode. Take a second to think about it and then share it. You can share it with me on Instagram or Facebook or with someone that you know, because when we share, we get to learn things again and they become deeper and they become a part of us. So take that step to share. And while we're talking about sharing, I want to encourage you to share the podcast. If you hear this episode or any episode that is meaningful to you, go ahead and share it on social media, or you can actually there's 3 little dots on the podcast itself that you can share. Text it to a friend or share in any way that works for you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.